So I just finished my freshman year of high school, and aside from the new waves of homework and college-level courses, I've noticed dozens of changes from middle school. Which is expected, of course, but one sticks out in particular. Dating. It's a lot more noticeable than in middle school, and the relationships tend to last a little longer than a week. But this new idea has sort of introduced the question: can men and women just be friends? And you see this question all the time. You see it in articles, you see it in movies, you see it in podcasts, you see it in almost all forms of media. And a lot of times, in high school settings where these forms of attraction are relatively new, the answer is seemingly no. However, I believe that friendships between heterosexual men and women absolutely can exist. And it'd be easier for them to exist and more common if society's assumptions and definitions of relationships would decrease and adapt. So a study by Dr. April Blesky-Rechik suggested that men tend to overestimate the amount of attraction in an opposite-sex friendship, and women tend to underestimate it. Because of this, men tend to answer the question, can men and women just be friends, with no, and women answer with yes, hence why I'm up here. In fact, in a study at Utah State University, all male participants answered this question with no, and all female participants answered it with yes. But see, this data tends to look at instinctual behaviors. And according to Dr. Blesky-Rechik, it's evolutionary. According to her, over evolutionary history, men who received ambiguous signals of interest needed to act on them, because if they didn't, they would have been out-reproduced by the men who did. But over time, humanity has developed the concept of restraint. We've stopped acting on every single urge we have. That's why buildings aren't on fire and half of the population isn't dead. If we make the data more human, if we adapt it to the current society and modernize it, then we don't need to make the race to reproduce as much of a factor. There are plenty of people out there, plenty of fish in the sea, as they say. Not really as much of a race anymore. Another cause of these assumptions is the influence of media. From a young age, we are constantly subjected to romance plots. Almost every kids' movie follows a common pattern. Protagonist encounters issue, protagonist overcomes issue, protagonist gets married happily ever after, yada, yada, yada. Tangled, Lion King, How to Train Your Dragon, Ratatouille, heck, even Cars, all have the main character only having that happy ending after falling in love. I'd like to reiterate with you all, the Cars fall in love. This pattern can create the idea for kids that you'll only be happy when you're dating or married. And seeing that pattern over and over and over again can heavily influence the way kids view the world and love as a whole. Now, these assumptions have many negative consequences, including creating societal pressure to find a partner. The pressure to be in a committed romantic relationship is apparent in society, most notably in high school settings. According to the Pew Research Center, 53% of 18 to 29-year-olds feel some sort of pressure by society to find a partner. When you compare this with the 42% for those aged 30 to 49, 32% for those aged 50 to 64, and 21% for those aged 65 and above, there is roughly a decrease of 11% of the population with each age regimen as time goes on. If it's already 53% for those aged 18 to 29, we can expect roughly 63% of those younger than 18 to feel pressured by society. That's over 3 in 5. And in a high school setting where peer pressure is prevalent, I'm honestly not surprised it's expected to be over half. Now, this pressure can create harmful ideologies in one's mindset, especially for a young and impressionable teenager. It can create the idea of, oh, I'm single, that's bad. It can make the teenager feel like they're not cool for not having a partner. It can rush teenagers to find a partner, which will result in conflict and eventual breakup. These assumptions can also harm pre-existing relationships. Let's create a hypothetical situation. A guy and a girl are talking. Let's name them Sally and Jake. Sally and Jake are friends. Some of their friends make comments. "Aw, you guys would be so cute together. You guys should date," stuff like that. If those comments continue on for a long period of time, Sally and Jake could start to think, "Oh, I can't talk to this person without people thinking we're dating." And that creates two options. A, it becomes very awkward between the two, likely causing them to divide. Or B, it creates a forced relationship, which will just end up in, as I said before, conflict and eventual breakup. But let's take this out of the hypothetical. Let's make it real. I have a guy friend. Let's nickname him John. I've known John for 1.5 years, give or take. I sit with him at lunch 2 or 3 times a week. Now, at one of these lunch visits, one of John's other friends comes up to me with John's bag and says, "Hey, you're John's girlfriend, right?" And I just said, "Sure," and took his bag because honestly, what else do you do in that situation? Now, unbeknownst to me, a total of 8 people thought that John and I were dating. And this isn't the only time I've been mistaken for dating someone else. It's happened 4 times, all with different people. And a lot of times, the only suggestions that people need to make these assumptions are the smallest things. Talking, walking together, eating lunch together. These assumptions have created a wall between men and women. They've unnecessarily restricted opposite-sex friendships. It's made guys and girls scared to be physically affectionate with each other for being misperceived as dating. Scared to exchange contact information because asking for her number means you like her. I can't tell a guy, "Hey, you look nice today," without being perceived as hitting on him. And this wall is incredibly apparent in high school settings. If we answer the question, can men and women just be friends with no, then we alienate pre-existing friendships. We slap a label on there and say, "You guys have to date now." These assumptions do a lot more harm than they do good. Society's misunderstandings of opposite-sex friendships are incredibly harmful to us, and until we get rid of those misconceptions, then that wall will continue to exist. Those relationships will continue to get pressured, rushed, and broken. And high school youth will keep getting pressed until eventually they break. Thank you.